call is about real estate, but it's not about real estate. Make it about not about real estate in a sense.
Right.
Like a lot of the what I was using yesterday, like he was mentioning, is I would just call and be like, "Hey, I used to say, hey, it's Eric Grimsman with EXP Realty, but I'm actually starting to use our group more and saying, hey, this is Eric Grimsman with the Dean's List group. We're very involved with our community. I'm just reaching out to see how I could help you aside from real estate at the moment."
Yeah, and just try it, you know. So I think the script that you were using, Jess, which I would say, keep using that. Like I probably wouldn't change a whole lot unless you have like 1,000 dials under your belt, like with a certain script, because you don't want to like just go from script to script to script, because you want to it really doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter what script you use, as long as you're confident. That's the secret sauce. So you just got to be confident, and you got to know how to handle the next thing that comes up, because it doesn't matter what we say there. We're just the only goal there is to just elicit a response. That's it. And once they respond, then we can dance. And that's what this conversation is. It's dance. So I think the one that Kevin uses a lot that I really like is, hey, Mr. Jones, this is Dean from the Dean's List group at EXP Realty, and there's a few homes that sold in your area, and just curious if there's anything that I can do for you at the moment.
Right.
Yep. And with that script, you don't get a whole lot of objections. You will get no's, but that's just because, there's a certain amount of the population that just doesn't want to do anything. So take the no's as like, it's not going to be a win every time. Like, just move on from the no's. But if they give you an objection, it always is good to let them know, like, hey, I never know till I call. Like I said, I was just calling around to see if I could help anybody. So I figured I'd give you a ring. And that's like basically how I handle if they get emotional, Yeah.
I love that. I never know until I call.
Yeah.
The other thing too is, like, if you just get a hard no, that, like, if you get a hard no and they're still on the phone, like, obviously they're open to continuing the dance. So if somebody says, oh no, there's nothing you can do for me. Okay, great. Well, and this is where you use those the framework of the objections, or the framework of the question, where it's if condition, would you action? So, hey, if you were to move, would you have a realtor that you would trust in helping you with that? And then if they say yes, great. Who is it?
Most of the time they'll never be able to give you a name.
Yeah.
It's like John Smith.
Yeah. And like, I would just be honest, and like, if somebody was like, yeah, and I'm like, oh great, who is it? I forget his name. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like, there might be, it sounds like there, I'd probably say, like, it sounds like there's an opportunity for you to have a better relationship there. So, I would love to be kind of like the next in line. And would it be okay with you if I followed up from time to time, just to provide some value on what's going on in your neighborhood and maybe what your house is worth and things like that? Would that be okay with you? Okay, great. Right. So we want to transition into, the goal is to have an arrangement set up where we're staying in touch, and that is a nurture. Right. So if somebody says like, oh yes, we're actually thinking about selling, like, fuck yeah, that's, that's the holy grail right there. So, that's somebody that we can just go ahead and set an appointment for, or, really start digging into that conversation. But most of these calls are going to be nurtures because they'll say, oh, I'm going to die in this house. Oh, awesome. Well, hey, if you were to move, would you have a realtor that you would trust in helping you with that? Right. So I don't really care what they said. My question is still the same, because I've literally had people that said, oh yeah, I'm going to die in this house. And literally 3 months later, their house is on the market. So like, they don't know what they're going to do. They don't know what the future holds. They don't have a crystal ball. And somebody's intentions can change in an instant. Right? I mean, just think about think about any decision that you've made. Like, there was one day where that decision was like never going to happen. And then the next day something happened where like now that decision is being made. So that's how decisions work, is people don't make decisions until they are ready to make a decision. And so when somebody says, hey, I'm going to die in this house, that's just what their intention is right now. That is almost always not true. So they're not going to die in that house, most likely. So it's important for us to realize that like the way that we can serve them is be like, hey, that sounds awesome. It sounds like you love where you're at, and sounds like there's really no reason to move. So good for you. Just curious, if you ever were to move, would you have a realtor that you would trust to help you with that? So, Kevin, what are your thoughts on that approach? Is that the process that you use as well?
Yep. Yeah. If it's a hard no, then basically continue to ask if they, if something popped up and they needed to move, do they have an agent that would help them out? And then like 100% of the time it's no. And then would it be okay if I stayed in touch? And, I'd love to help you out if you ever do need anything. Like 90% they say yes. And then you say, cool, what's your email?
Yep. So I'm going to type this out here.
Kevin, I got a question for you. Is the emails that come through on Mojo, if it's already in there, do you still use, hey, what's your email? Or would you say, hey, is this, and this a good email?
No, I never say that because it looks too creepy.
Okay.
It's a little overwhelming enough for us to be calling them, knowing their name, knowing where they live. So just always ask, and a lot of times in Mojo, those emails are like not theirs at all. So yeah, just ask.
Okay.
Yeah, I did that yesterday. I was like, and just confirming your email, because he wanted me to, email him because he wants to sell his house this year. And I confirmed his email. So like saying it, I was like, this is probably really weird. He's probably wondering, how the hell do I have his email?
Yeah, I did that a bunch yesterday, actually. That's why I was asking.
So that makes more sense.
So the Cold Realty leads that had email addresses.
Yeah, a lot of them are actually good emails.
Yeah.
The ones that you guys asked, were they good emails?
Yeah.
Wow.
They were the right emails.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I would probably like pretend you don't have their email.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I asked the question, because now that he says it, I'm like, yeah, that probably is real. Because I did have a guy was literally like, how do you have my number? You know where I live? And I was like, we buy into a database and it's all public records. So he was like, I don't need any help.
Yeah, by the way, with that objection, that's what I always say is it's just public record. And like I said, I was just calling around and seeing if anybody needed help. And the way I say everything, my tone, I say statements, but they sound like questions.
Yeah, and the other thing to consider is anytime that you say something, like, you're leading their perspective with whatever you're saying. So if somebody says like, hey, how'd you get how do you know all this stuff about me? Instead of like, oh, well, I bought something and, now I have like all your information. That, like, the way that you say that matters. So if you say, oh, well, obviously, how like everything's public record these days, right? So I would, like, kind of go in that direction where it's like, oh, how like everything is on the internet nowadays, right? Yeah. So, so that's the reason why I was calling. Is there anything I could do to help you? And I would just keep going on into the conversation, but like that tonality of just like, oh yeah, it's not a big deal. Like, everything's on the internet nowadays.
Yeah.
You don't think it's a big deal, they won't think it's a big deal. So, and sometimes I'll just say, like, if they say, how'd you get my number? Oh, the White Pages. You've heard of them, right? Yeah. So just got your number off the White Pages. Hope that's okay.
Yeah, that's literally what I always say.
Yeah.
I have the big phone book out. I'm just literally going one number at a time.
Yep. Yeah, I'm on letter J. It's been a long day.
Actually had somebody yesterday, Jess, that when I was like, hey, Peter, and he's like, no, this isn't Peter, and then it turned out to be Peter. It's like, yeah, he's like, yeah, this isn't Peter, and he's like, I was like, oh, this is Eric with EXP, and he's like, oh, Eric, like he knew me, and he's like, oh yeah, this is Peter. I was just thought it was somebody else. I was like, and then literally told me that he's looking to sell one of his half of his duplex as a rental. I was like, perfect.
So, what do you guys think is like so let's say if somebody says, no, I don't have a realtor that would help me with that. How do you get the permission, or how do you opt them in to, more communication down the road? What does that word track sound like?
I would agree with Kevin. I kind of just say, great, that do you mind if I stay in touch with you every few months just to see if there's anything I could do for you at the moment?
Cool.
Yep. So we want to keep the verbiage, the actual number of words, to a minimum, because that's just how cold calls work. Mm-hmm. So say, like, okay, would it be okay if I stayed in touch? And that's it. And then you just let them talk.
How do you feel about, awesome, hey, would you be offended if I stayed in touch with you?
Yeah.
And what I like about that is that we actually want them to say no. So the psychology is like, if the confused mind says no, we're bringing them into a no that actually is a yes for us. Mm. So, that's something I learned in Cutco is like, if you have somebody that's saying no a lot, they're probably like really, they're programming themselves in the conversation to say no. So it's like, hey, would you be offended if I just kept you kept in touch with you every couple months just to check in and see if there's anything I could do for you? No. Great. See you in another few months. What do you think about that?
I do like that. Would you be offended?
That's good.
Yeah.
I'll try that today.
Jessica, is this helping?
Oh, definitely.
Okay, great.
And to Jessica's point as well, it is, it's almost as hard to get a yes as it is to get a no. So we should probably go over what we do when we get a yes, because you hear so many no's, and then when you get a yes, you're literally like a deer in the headlight, and you're like,
yeah.
wait, You just say yes.
Nobody ever says yes.
Yeah. It's like, I've called 3,000 people today. You're the only one to say yes.
Okay, great. So, so the question is, yes, there is something that you can help me out. So, Kevin, how would you handle that?
So when they say yes, the first question I ask is, okay, do you have an agent to help you with that? Or, whatever they say, like, yeah, I need to sell this place, and, I just have to do a couple things here and there. And then I'll say, okay, do you have an agent who you've chosen to help you? And usually they'll say no. Sometimes actually Sylvain, he said yes. And I was like, okay, but he told me that he hadn't decided yet. And then I literally just say, well, I would just like an opportunity to get an interview. But I always ask him about the agent. Next, I say, okay, tell me a little bit about the house. And then once they tell me, what they've done with the house, the condition, things like that, the next question is, why would you want to sell that? So now you dig into their motivation a little bit. And then once you have their motivation, you try to set an appointment, ask for the appointment. And that's it.
So you wouldn't ever just assume that, like, I don't ever, rarely should I say, not ever, but ever ask if they are committed to an agent. I just kind of go into, hey, tell me a little bit about the house.
It's good practice to ask about the agent. You don't want to waste your time too. Like, don't forget that, like the last thing you want to do is get a lead that just isn't a qualified lead at all. And now you're wasting your time and energy, and you think this whole thing doesn't work. You just want to find people that are like, yeah, I'm ready to sell. No, I don't have an agent. This is what I've done to the house. Here's why I want to sell it. And then, just like I said, go for the appointment.
Yeah, I agree. I think getting that piece of information is really important, because some people won't tell you that they're working with an agent. Even like the YLOPO leads, like, I always ask, like, hey, I'll get into a conversation where they're like, yeah, just like really hitting it off. And I'm like, damn, this is a really hot lead. And I always ask, like, well, hey, just curious, like, have you talked to anybody else? Or are you committed to anybody else and helping you with this? Or is this something that I can help you with? And sometimes they'll be like, oh, well, yeah, we do have kind of, an agent relationship. I'm like, great. Well, I don't want to step on any toes. Is there any reason why you wouldn't use them? And, sometimes they're just like, well, they're not that aggressive or whatever. Okay, great. Well, it sounds like you're looking for a different experience. So tell me more about that, and then once they kind of express all that, then I could say, I can help you achieve your goals, only if you commit, like, I'll commit to you if you commit to me. And if you don't want to do that, that's fine. You can just go to your other agent, but I definitely don't want to step on anybody's toes. If you're like halfway working with somebody, you're either working with me or you're not.
Yeah. And if they are halfway working, but you ask them, if they are, and they tell you no, now you assume. If they tell you no, I'm not working with an agent, just assume that now you're their agent, and just kind of step right into that role. And that's exactly what I did with Sylvain. He said, I have a couple agents that I'm working with. And I said, okay, awesome. But I just stepped right into the role. I never gave him a break. And I can guarantee you the only reason I got the listing was because the other agents weren't calling them as much or texting them as much. That's the only reason.
Yeah.
Well, that's where I was going.
Who they had a relationship with? Jim Fisher.
Yeah.
Do you know about that?
Who, me?
Yeah. Sylvain. They had a relationship with Jim Fisher. So Jim Fisher called me.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I figured it was Jim, but I didn't know.
Yeah.
Wow.
So he's like, hey, I'd rather you than anybody else, but just curious, like, you know, how'd you get that listing? I'm like, just cold calling.
Wow. Nice, man. And see that's exactly how it works, man. Like,
He was like, damn, I've been literally talking to them for a year and a half.
Damn, that sucks.
So I'm like, hey, that happens, man. It's happened a lot to me as well.
Well,
Yep.
that's where I'm kind of going with that is like,
I'll be right back,
because
guys. I'm just gonna
yeah, no problem. Just really talking with Kevin and Jess about this is, yeah, that's what I mean is like, that's why I don't ask that question, is because I know I could outwork any other agent with that person. So I just kind of just already assume that if I provide them with enough value that but I see where everybody's saying though, you don't want to create enemies either.
yeah, and it's I mean, I don't even care about creating enemies. It's like if they tell you no and you step into the role, they're going to be more committed, even if they do know another agent. Like, you just want them to say no.
Okay.
And if they say yes, just ask them who it is. Like, I'm very respectful if they say yes. You know what I mean? Like, okay, who is it? Oh, Jim Fisher? Awesome. I know Jim's an amazing guy. Like, if Sylvain would have told me that, that's exactly what I would have said. I know Jim's an amazing agent. You're in great hands. So I appreciate your time. And, hope you stay safe.
Would you still follow up with that person maybe a couple of months down the road and just see how Jim
I might
is
wind
doing?
up calling him again. Yeah.
Okay.
But, I mean, I wouldn't go out of my way.
Yeah.
So how do you ask for the appointment? Because with people that, I get a conversation and they're actually engaging, I get too excited and I feel like I can over talk a little bit. So
Yeah.
I know you mentioned, the less words, with cold calling is the better. So when you get someone that's like, well, what are houses in my neighborhood selling for? And they start talking to me, telling me their motivation. How do you kind of cut that into asking for an appointment?
So as you go down those, like, if they say yes, there's like 3 or 4 questions. Ask them about the agent, ask them about the house, ask them why they're selling, and then right after they say why they want to sell, like, well, it's a second home to me, and I'm scared of with all this COVID stuff, I just want to get it sold. And then you restate their motivation to say, look, Bob, I know you want to just get it sold. Why don't we meet, sometime later this week? I could do Friday at 3 or Saturday at 4, which works better for you. And then, you're going to deal with yes, no, or maybe at that point. But that's just how I ask. And then it really depends on their situation. So,
Okay.
like, a lot of people are talking to other agents, so I'll say, look, I know you have another agent and I know you're looking to sell it. Would you mind if I just sat down with you and showed you what I could do? And then hopefully they say, yeah, that's fine. And then I just do the same thing. Oh, I got Friday at 3, you know how to do that.
Right.
Yeah, Jess, I struggle with the same thing. Is as soon as I hear the yes, I get very like antsy, and I'm like, all right, and I have to.
So do I, because I hear so many no's, and then I hear yes, my brain literally like scrambles.
Mm-hmm.
So I just have to try to remember to catch myself and dial it back, and talk slower, because I tend to talk fast as well. And I'm like, all right, well, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and just know those questions that come after a yes. And after a yes, you want them talking a lot more than you are. Just ask a couple of short questions, get them to qualify themselves, divulge some information, and then when you determine that, okay, they're a good seller, things look like it's lining up, this could be a good listing, now you offer an appointment. Be like, hey, look, I'd love to sit down with you. We can at least, talk about it further. Would the weekend
Mhm.
work or weekday, whatever.
I guess the only thing I would add to that, Jess, was it's always what Dean has always taught us is when we get antsy like that is just be present in the moment. So, because I know once we hear the yes, we're like, well, what's the next question I can ask them? But
Yep.
I guess if we just let them talk and just be present, then it might go a little bit better for us.
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Awesome. So, did that help you achieve your outcome that you wanted for this morning?
Definitely.
Cool. Anything else that you guys want to jam out about?
Nope. I'm good for now.
Yeah, I'm perfect.
This will get me through the next hour.
Yep.
Perfect. So yeah, set some intentions for today, and let's share the schedules again at 7:00. And I think it's just really important to spend the next 30 minutes just really outlining what we want to get accomplished today. What are the things that we're committed to? What's today going to look like? And then Eric and I actually went through a visualization exercise last night. And, the more texture that you can give to what today is going to look like in your brain, the better. So that's why visualization is so important, is because when you visualize something, you're seeing it before it happens. And what it's telling your subconscious brain, your subconscious brain doesn't know the difference between something you actually experience and something that you visualize. To your subconscious mind, it feels the same. And so when you visualize something, you're telling your subconscious mind, hey, this is normal. This is an experience that's happening. So that way, when you have that experience, you're inviting that thing that your subconscious is believing as normal. So we went through an exercise yesterday that, today he's going to be making 250 calls on a certain list. He's going to get one listing appointment, one buyer appointment. The buyer appointment's going to be 260,000. The listing appointment's going to be 350,000. And we realized that with $610,000 in production, in volume, with the commissions that he's going to earn, dividing that by 250 calls today, each call is worth how much?
$37.
So every call that he's making is worth $37. So I told him, just visualize that phone being your ATM, where every dial you do is worth $37. But the key is that you don't get paid the $37 until it vests in 90 days from now. And the crazy thing about it vesting in 90 days is that you have to continue the activity, or else you lose out on that money that's about to vest. So you've got to stay committed and keep nurturing through the course of those 90 days. But that phone is your ATM. Every number that you dial is worth $37, to create what you're going to create today. So just getting that clear on what today's going to look like, what it's going to feel like, the intention with every dial that you make. So just give as much texture to it over the next 30 minutes, and put your schedule together and just feel the feelings that you want to feel all day today. Give yourself the deserving feeling of feeling those feelings, because when you accept it and invite it as normal, then that subconscious is giving the universe a signal where it's like, hey, let's cue in some abundance here because I'm already feeling it. It's all frequency. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Sounds great.
Jess and Kevin, can you